Zorlak stepped off the transport ship and felt Earth's gravity pull at his slender frame. The air smelled different here, rich with countless organic compounds that his home planet of Vexilia lacked. He adjusted the atmospheric filter around his neck, not because he needed it to breathe, but because the sheer variety of smells overwhelmed his senses. "Ambassador Zorlak, welcome to Earth." A human female approached him, hand extended in the traditional human greeting. "I'm Samantha Miller, your liaison during your stay." Zorlak studied her for a moment. Pink-tinged skin, dark brown hair pulled back neatly, and a facial expression that Vexilians rarely displayed, a smile. He had been briefed on human customs, and awkwardly extended his three-fingered hand to meet hers. "Thank you for your welcome," he said, his translator device converting his natural clicks and whistles into smooth English. "I trust our exchange will be productive for both our worlds." Samantha nodded and guided him toward a waiting vehicle. "Your quarters are ready at the Interstellar Relations Center. I imagine you'd like to rest after your journey?" Zorlak shook his head. "Vexilians require minimal recovery time. I am prepared to begin my diplomatic duties immediately." "That's impressive," Samantha said, glancing at the 7-foot alien beside her. "But there's no rush. Your 6-month cultural exchange program officially starts tomorrow." As they drove through the streets of Chicago, Zorlak observed the humans with scientific detachment. Their species fascinated and confused the Vexilian Empire. Despite their technological inferiority, humans had somehow managed to establish themselves as important players in galactic politics through sheer adaptability and what Vexilians considered irrational persistence. "You've been assigned a private apartment with amenities modified for Vexilian needs," Samantha explained as they entered a tall building near the lake. "The nutrient synthesizer has been programmed with your standard formulations." Zorlak nodded, with approval. Vexilians had evolved beyond the inefficiency of flavorful food centuries ago. They consumed precisely calibrated nutrient blocks designed for perfect biological efficiency. The idea of eating for pleasure seemed primitive to most of his kind. His apartment was sparse by human standards, but comfortable for a Vexilian. The large window overlooked the vast body of water humans called Lake Michigan. "Is everything satisfactory?" Samantha asked. "Yes. I require nothing more." Zorlak moved to the nutrient synthesizer, selecting his evening meal formula with a few button presses. A gray rectangular block emerged, exactly like the ones he consumed at home. Samantha watched with poorly concealed curiosity as he took a bite of the tasteless substance. "I've read that Vexilians engineered taste out of your diet centuries ago." "A logical improvement," Zorlak replied between mechanical bites. "Taste serves no purpose except distraction from efficiency." "Well, that's certainly one perspective." Samantha hesitated, then added, "Listen, I know this isn't in the official itinerary, but would you like to join me for dinner tomorrow evening? At my home?" Zorlak tilted his head in confusion. "But I have nutrient blocks here." "Yes, but sharing meals is an important human social custom. It might help with your cultural understanding mission." She smiled again. "Besides, Vexilians can eat our food safely, right? Your briefing materials said your species is omnivorous with compatible digestive systems." "This is correct," Zorlak admitted. "While unnecessary, consuming Earth food poses no health risk." He considered the diplomatic implications. Understanding human customs was part of his mission. "Very well, I will participate in this dinner ritual." "Great. I'll pick you up at 7 tomorrow evening." Samantha headed for the door, then turned back. "And don't worry, I won't make anything too weird for your first Earth meal." After she left, Zorlak sent his daily report to the Vexilian embassy. He noted the human preoccupation with food as an area for further study, though hardly a priority. Then he spent the evening reviewing Earth's diplomatic history and preparing for tomorrow's meetings. The next day passed in a blur of introductions and orientations. Zorlak met with human officials, answered their questions about Vexilian culture, and gathered information about Earth's complex political systems. By evening, He had almost forgotten about the dinner arrangement until Samantha arrived at his daughter. "Ready for your first human meal?" she asked cheerfully. Zorlak nodded, approaching the event with the same clinical interest he'd apply to studying an unusual rock formation. "I am prepared for this anthropological experience." Samantha lived in a smaller dwelling 20 minutes away. As they entered her apartment, Zorlak was immediately struck by unfamiliar aromas, sharp, sweet, and savory scents that made his dormant olfactory receptors twitch involuntarily. "What is that smell?" he asked, unable to hide his curiosity. "That's dinner. I made spaghetti with marinara sauce, garlic bread, and apple pie for dessert." Samantha led him to a small table set with plates and utensils. "I figured Italian food would be a good introduction. It's pretty universally loved." Zorlak seated himself awkwardly on the human-sized chair. "These foods hold cultural significance?" "In a way. These are what we call comfort foods, dishes that remind us of home and family." Samantha placed a plate before him with long strands of pasta covered in red sauce, alongside a piece of bread. "This marinara sauce is my grandmother's recipe. She taught me to make it when I was a child." "You prepare food using methods passed through genetic lineage rather than optimal scientific formulation?" Zorlak found this inefficient but oddly interesting. "That's part of what makes it special." Samantha sat across from him and twisted her fork in the pasta. "Food is more than nutrition for us. It's about connection, tradition, pleasure." Zorlak observed her eating technique and mimicked it, awkwardly twirling the pasta around his fork. With great hesitation, he brought it to his mouth. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. His taste buds, dormant for generations but still, functionally intact, exploded with signals his brain barely knew how to process. The tangy acidity of the tomato, the rich depth of the herbs, the mild sweetness underneath, each flavor component registered separately, yet harmonized perfectly. Zorlak froze, fork still in his mouth, eyes widening to their fullest extent. "Are you okay?" Samantha asked, concerned by his reaction. "Is it too spicy?" Zorlak slowly removed the fork and struggled to find words. "This is unexpected. You don't like it?" Samantha looked disappointed. "I lack sufficient reference points to determine preference." Zorlak stared at his plate in confusion. "My species engineered taste receptors into dormancy thousands of years ago. We considered sensory pleasure from food an evolutionary distraction." "Oh, I didn't realize," Samantha began. But Zorlak was already taking another bite, driven by a curiosity he couldn't explain. The second taste was even more intense than the first. He detected new flavors, the garlic, the olive oil, something called basil. Each bite revealed new dimensions of experience his nutrient blocks had never provided. "Try the garlic bread," Samantha suggested, watching his reaction with growing fascination. The bread was warm, crisp on the outside and soft within. The buttery garlic flavor made his head swim with sensation. Zorlak found himself taking bite after bite, struggling to maintain the composed demeanor expected of a Vexillian diplomat. "This is..." He searched for an appropriately detached scientific term but found none. "This is extraordinary," Samantha smiled. "Just wait until you try the apple pie." By the time they reached dessert, Zorlak's worldview had begun to crack at its foundations. The sweet spiced apples and flaky crust triggered something primal in his brain. Pleasure circuits that had lain dormant for millennia suddenly firing, at full capacity. "Our records indicate humans spend excessive time and resources on food production and consumption," he said between bites of pie. "I now find myself reassessing this analysis." "So you like it?" Samantha asked with a knowing smile. Zorlak set down his fork and looked at his empty plate. In just one meal, his understanding of human culture had shifted dramatically. If his people had abandoned something this profound in their quest for efficiency, what else might they have lost? "I require further data to form conclusions," said finally, his voice betraying more emotion than any Vexillian would consider proper. "Perhaps we should conduct additional dinner research." Samantha grinned. I know a great Thai place we could try tomorrow. That night, alone in his apartment, Zorlak looked at his nutrient synthesizer with new eyes. The gray block it produced seemed suddenly inadequate in ways he couldn't have imagined just days before. For the first time in his life, he left his evening meal unfinished, his thoughts still lingering on the flavors of Earth. 3 days after his first human meal, Zorlak sat in an important diplomatic meeting about trade agreements between Earth and Vexilia. Representatives from both planets discussed mineral rights and technology exchanges, but Zorlak struggled to focus. His mind kept returning to the Thai food Samantha had introduced him to the night before. The complex blend of sweet, sour, spicy, and savory flavors had been even more intense than the Italian meal. He found himself wondering what other taste experiences awaited him instead of concentrating on interplanetary tariff regulations. Ambassador Zorlak, your thoughts on the proposal? The question from the human trade minister jolted him back to attention. I would need to review the specifics more carefully, he said, embarrassed by his wandering mind. Such lack of focus was unheard of among Vexilians. Their society valued concentration and efficiency above all else. After the meeting, Zorlak returned to his apartment and activated his communication terminal. The stern face of Ambassador Krentor, his superior at the Vexilian embassy, appeared on the screen. Your report is late, Zorlak, Krentor said without greeting. This is unlike you. My apologies, Ambassador. Earth customs have required more adaptation than anticipated. He couldn't bring himself to mention the food. It seemed too trivial, too emotional. Remember your purpose there. We seek to understand humans to better negotiate with them, not to be influenced by their primitive habits. Krentor narrowed his eyes. You seem distracted. I am functioning within acceptable parameters, Zorlak responded with the standard Vexilian phrase. My report will be transmitted within the hour. After ending the call, Zorlak sat at his desk and began working on his report. He described the trade meetings and human negotiation tactics with clinical precision. When he reached the section on cultural observations, he hesitated. Should he mention the food? It seemed relevant to understanding humans, yet he worried his personal reaction might be seen as inappropriate. In the end, he wrote only a brief, detached paragraph. Humans place unusual importance on food consumption beyond nutritional requirements. They use meals as social bonding opportunities and appear to derive emotional satisfaction from varied flavors and textures. This practice, while inefficient, may explain certain aspects of human decision-making processes. That evening, Samantha took him to a Mexican restaurant. Zorlak experienced tortilla chips with salsa, beef tacos, and something called guacamole. Each new flavor seemed to awaken more dormant neural pathways in his brain. The spicy heat of the salsa triggered a physical reaction, a pleasant warmth that spread through his body. Your face is turning slightly purple, Samantha noted with a smile. That's a Vexilian blush, right? Zorlak touched his cheeks, embarrassed. A minor capillary response, nothing concerning. You really like the food, don't you? She asked. I've never seen a Vexilian show so much enjoyment. Zorlak wanted to deny it, to claim he was merely conducting research, but the truth was undeniable. Yes, he admitted quietly. I find these flavors fascinating. We have nothing like this on Vexilia. What do you eat there? Just those gray nutrient blocks? For the past 700 years, yes. Our scientists determined that taste was an evolutionary distraction. Food became purely functional. He took another bite of taco, savoring the complex flavors. I never questioned this approach until now. Over the next 2 weeks, Zorlak performed his diplomatic duties during the day, but his evenings became dedicated to exploring Earth cuisine. Samantha introduced him to Indian curries, Japanese sushi, American hamburgers, French pastries, and dozens of other foods. With each new experience, he found it harder to return to his nutrient blocks. He began reading about human food history during his free time. He learned about spice trades that shaped Earth's political landscape, Wars fought over access to ingredients, cultural identities formed around regional cuisines. The more he learned, the more he understood that food was not merely about taste. It connected humans to their history, their families, and each other. One morning, after a night spent dreaming about chocolate cake, Zorlak stared at his nutrient block breakfast with growing dissatisfaction. He pushed it aside and left for his appointments without eating. At the Interstellar Relations Center, he was surprised to find another Vexillian waiting for him. Senior Cultural Officer Peltok just arrived from Vexilia. "The embassy has concerns about your recent behavior," Peltok said without preamble. "Your reports have become irregular and lack detail. Ambassador Krentor sent me to evaluate your condition." Zorlak maintained a neutral expression. "My work has not been compromised. Yet you have been spending excessive time with your human liaison outside of official functions." Peltok's voice carried disapproval. "You have been observed in numerous food consumption establishments." "I am researching human cultural practices," Zorlak said defensively. "By participating in them?" Peltok shook his head. "This goes beyond research, Zorlak. You skipped your morning nutrition. You show signs of cultural contamination." The accusation hung in the air between them. Cultural contamination was a serious charge in Vexillian society, implying that a diplomat had lost objectivity and begun adopting foreign values. "I remain committed to my mission," Zorlak insisted. "Then you will have no objection to canceling your unofficial activities with the human female and returning to standard Vexillian routines." Peltok made it clear this was not a suggestion. "I will be monitoring your activities until I am satisfied you remain properly Vexillian in your outlook." That afternoon, Zorlak had to tell Samantha about the canceled dinner plans. "So this Peltok person is basically your babysitter now?" she asked, concerned. "He is ensuring I maintain proper Vexillian protocol." Zorlak found it difficult to meet her eyes. "My superiors believe I have been spending too much time on non-essential activities." "You mean eating good food instead of those tasteless blocks?" Samantha frowned. "What's wrong with enjoying something?" Zorlak wasn't sure how to explain Vexillian philosophy to her. "My society values focus and efficiency. Sensory pleasures are seen as distractions from intellectual development." "But you've enjoyed trying different foods, haven't you?" she pressed. He couldn't deny it. "Yes, more than I should, according to my people's beliefs." Samantha thought for a moment. "Well, what if we approach this differently? What if you're not just enjoying food but studying its scientific properties? We could document everything: the chemical compounds, the neurological responses, the cultural significance." Zorlak considered this approach. A scientific analysis might be acceptable to Peltok. "Great. We can start tomorrow. I'll bring reference materials and we can make it an official cultural exchange project." She smiled mischievously. "And if you happen to enjoy the research samples, that's just a side effect." For the first time since Peltok's arrival, Zorlak felt hope. Perhaps he could continue his exploration of human food while satisfying Vexillian protocols. But as he returned to his apartment that evening, he wondered why the thought of returning to nutrient blocks filled him with such dread. As he lay in bed that night, images of all the foods he had tried danced in his mind. He realized with growing clarity that his experience went beyond mere physical pleasure. Earth food had awakened something inside him: curiosity, emotion, and a sense that efficiency might not be the only worthy goal of existence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges with Peltok watching his every move. But Zorlak was now certain of one thing: he could never go back to seeing food as mere nutrition. Something fundamental had changed within him, and he wasn't sure if that made him less Vexillian or simply more alive. The next morning, Zorlak met Samantha at the Interstellar Relations Center library. She arrived carrying a large bag full of books, data tablets, and a small container. "I brought reference materials on food chemistry," she said, glancing around, to make sure Peltok wasn't nearby. "And a few research samples, too." Zorlak felt both nervous and excited. "Peltok has scheduled a meeting with me later. He expects a full report on my activities." "Then we better make this look official." Samantha spread the books on the table. These cover the chemical compounds in various cuisines and their effects on the brain. They spent the morning creating a formal research proposal titled Comparative Analysis of Earth Cuisine, Implications for Cross-Species Diplomacy. Samantha was clever in her wording, framing food tasting as essential cultural research rather than pleasure-seeking. When she was sure no one was watching, Samantha slid the small container across the table. A research sample, Belgian chocolate, scientifically fascinating, of course. Zorlak opened it and cautiously tasted the dark square inside. The rich, complex flavor was unlike anything he had experienced yet. Bitter, sweet, and somehow deeply satisfying. His eyes widened involuntarily. Interesting chemical reaction? Samantha asked with a smile. Most educational, Zorlak managed to say, quickly finishing the sample and hiding the container. They were so absorbed in their work that they didn't notice Peltok enter the library until he was standing beside their table. "What is this project, Ambassador Zorlak?" he asked, picking up one of the books. Zorlak kept his voice steady. "A scientific analysis of human food as a cultural communication tool. Understanding their relationship with food may help us negotiate more effectively." Peltok looked skeptical but nodded slowly. "I will review your proposal. At least this approach seems more structured than your previous activities." He turned to leave, then added, "Remember, you have a meeting with the human delegation at 1500 hours. Do not be late." After he left, Zorlak and Samantha both relaxed. "That was close," she whispered. "Did you see his face when he looked at the chocolate wrapper?" "We must be more careful," Zorlak said. "But I believe our approach may work." Over. The next week, Zorlak and Samantha continued their research, documenting the chemical properties of various foods while secretly enjoying them. With each new taste, Zorlak found himself changing in subtle ways. He began to appreciate colors more vividly, music more deeply, and even found himself laughing at human jokes that once seemed pointless. Meanwhile, Peltok watched him closely, but couldn't find fault with his scientific approach. The research proposal had been approved, though with strict guidelines about maintaining Vexillian objectivity. Then came the diplomatic dinner that changed everything. The Earth government hosted a formal banquet for all alien representatives. As a high-ranking diplomat, Zorlak was required to attend, with Peltok accompanying him as his cultural advisor. The event was held in a grand hall with multiple food stations representing cuisines from around the world. "Remember to consume your nutrient block before attending," Peltok instructed that afternoon. "This will ensure you are not tempted by unnecessary sensory experiences." Zorlak nodded obediently, but for the first time, he deliberately disobeyed. He wanted to experience the banquet with his full senses, not dulled by prior consumption. At the event, Earth officials greeted the various alien delegates. Samantha was there in an official capacity, looking elegant in formal attire. She gave Zorlak a small smile as he and Peltok entered. "Ambassador Zorlak has been conducting fascinating research on human food culture," Samantha told a group of officials. "His scientific approach has been most impressive." The human Secretary of Interstellar Relations turned to Zorlak with interest. "Is that so? I'd love to hear more about your findings, Ambassador." Before Zorlak could respond, Peltok inserted himself into the conversation. "It is merely preliminary research into human behavioral patterns. Nothing significant yet." "On the contrary," Zorlak said, surprising himself with his boldness. "My research suggests that the sensory experience of food connects deeply with human decision-making processes and cultural identity. Understanding this connection may be vital for meaningful diplomatic relations." The secretary nodded appreciatively. "I couldn't agree more. Food brings people together across all cultures. In fact, this banquet was designed specifically to showcase that principle." He gestured toward the food stations. "Perhaps you'd care to continue your research with some practical samples?" Peltok looked alarmed. "Ambassador Zorlak has already consumed his daily nutrition. Additional consumption would be purely recreational, a violation of Vexillian principles." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Zorlak felt all eyes on him. This was a diplomatic test. Refuse and potentially offend their hosts, or accept and defy his own cultural advisor. I would be honored to sample Earth cuisine as part of continued research, Zorlak said finally. He saw disappointment flash across Peltok's face, but the human official smiled warmly. The secretary personally led Zorlak to various food stations, explaining the cultural significance of each dish. Peltok followed at a distance, his disapproval evident. Zorlak tasted small bites of foods from around the world: French cheese, Indian curry, Japanese sushi, Mexican mole sauce, each one opening new sensory pathways in his mind. As the evening progressed, Zorlak found himself engaged in the most productive diplomatic conversations of his career. The shared experience of food created connections with the human officials that formal meetings never had. He understood their jokes, appreciated their stories, and found himself sharing personal thoughts rather than just official positions. Peltok watched all this with growing concern. When they finally returned to the Vexillian embassy late that night, he confronted Zorlak in the privacy of his office. "You have gone too far," Peltok said. "I have observed significant behavioral changes in you. Your movements are more expressive. You displayed emotional responses 17 times this evening. You are beginning to act human." Zorlak didn't deny it. "I am discovering that there may be diplomatic advantages to understanding human sensory experiences." "This goes beyond understanding." Peltok slammed his hand on the desk. "You are enjoying these experiences. You are allowing yourself to be changed by them. This is not research. It is cultural contamination in its most severe form." "Perhaps what you call contamination I call growth," Zorlak said quietly. Peltok stared at him for a long moment. "I am contacting the High Council tonight. They must be informed of your condition. I will recommend your immediate recall to Vexilia for neurological recalibration." The words hit Zorlak like a physical blow. Neurological recalibration was a procedure used only in extreme cases, designed to reset a Vexillian's brain patterns to standard efficiency modes. If performed, he would lose all the new neural connections formed by his food experiences, all the new ways of thinking and feeling he had developed. "That is unnecessary," Zorlak protested. "My work here is producing valuable insights. My decision is final." Peltok moved toward the door. "You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Remain in your quarters until transport arrangements are complete." After Peltok left, Zorlak sat alone in his office, facing the most difficult decision of his life: return to Vexilia and lose everything he had discovered, or defy his people's traditions and face permanent exile. He touched his communication device and made a call. "Samantha, I need your help. Can we meet?" "Of course," she answered, hearing the urgency in his voice. "What's happened?" "Everything," Zorlak said simply. "And I cannot go back to the way things were before." Zorlak met Samantha at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the Vexillian embassy. He chose this location because it was unlikely that Peltok would look for him there. The shop was nearly empty, with just a few humans typing on computers or reading books. "They're going to send me back to Vexilia," Zorlak said as soon as Samantha sat down. "Peltok has recommended neurological recalibration." Samantha's eyes widened with concern. "What does that mean exactly?" "They will reset my brain patterns. All the new neural connections I've formed, all the ways I've learned to taste, to feel, to experience, will be erased." Zorlak stared down at the table. "I will return to standard Vexillian efficiency mode." "That's horrible," Samantha said. "They can't just erase part of who you are now. By Vexillian standards, these changes are a contamination, not an improvement." Zorlak looked up at her. "But I cannot go back to the way I was before. The thought of never tasting anything again, of returning to that emptiness, I cannot accept it." Samantha reached across the table and placed her hand on his, a gesture that would have seemed inappropriate to him just weeks ago. Now, he found comfort in the human touch. "What can we do?" she asked. "I am not sure. I could request asylum on Earth, but that would mean permanent exile from my homeworld." I would be the first Vexillian in 700 years to make such a choice. As they discussed options, the coffee shop door opened and a tall figure entered. Zorlak tensed, expecting Pel talk, but instead saw another Vexillian, one he didn't recognize. The stranger approached their table. Ambassador Zorlak, I apologize for interrupting, but I need to speak with you urgently. Zorlak remained cautious. Who are you? My name is Kelmar. I work in the Vexillian Scientific Division here on Earth. The stranger glanced around nervously. May I join you? What I have to say is of great importance. Samantha and Zorlak exchanged looks before nodding. Kelmar sat down and lowered his voice. I know about your situation. Word travels quickly in our small community here. But what you don't know is that you are not alone in your experiences. Zorlak leaned forward. What do you mean? There are others, Vexillians who have discovered human food and been changed by it. We keep our experiences secret from the embassy, of course. We meet in private to share meals and discuss our findings. This revelation stunned Zorlak. How many? 7 of us now. Scientists, cultural officers, even a security agent. We call ourselves the Awakened. Kelmar smiled slightly, an expression rarely seen on Vexillian faces. And we believe what's happening is not contamination, but evolution. Evolution? Samantha asked. Kelmar nodded. We have been conducting our own research in secret. When Vexillians experience flavor, dormant neural pathways activate. These pathways connect to parts of our brain associated with creativity, emotional processing, and intuitive thinking, functions our society has suppressed for centuries in favor of logic and efficiency. So food is actually changing Vexillian brain patterns? Samantha asked. Not changing, awakening what was already there. Our ancestors had these capacities before our society engineered them into dormancy. Kelmar turned to Zorlak. Your case interests us greatly because you hold a diplomatic position. The changes you're experiencing could have significant implications for Vexillian society. Zorlak processed this information slowly. Are you suggesting I should resist recalibration? I'm offering you an alternative. Come meet the others tonight. One of our members is Dr. Linda Parker, a human neurologist who has been helping us document our experiences. Perhaps together we can find a solution. Zorlak considered the offer. It seemed his only option besides returning to Vexilia or requesting asylum. Very well. Where and when? Kelmar gave them an address and time. Come hungry, he added with another small smile. That evening, Zorlak carefully left his quarters, avoiding embassy security. He met Samantha 2 blocks away, and together they traveled to an unmarked building in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, they found a surprising scene. 5 Vexillians and 2 humans sat around a large table filled with food. The Vexillians were engaged in animated conversation, showing more expression than Zorlak had ever seen among his people. A human female approached them. Ambassador Zorlak? I'm Dr. Linda Parker. We're so glad you came. Dr. Parker introduced the others. Kelmar from the Science Division, Nevrin, a cultural analyst, Tezelor, an agricultural specialist, Belzik, a security officer, and Varshan, a language expert. The other human was introduced as Chef Alex Gordon, who had been helping the group explore flavors suited to Vexillian physiology. We've been meeting like this for almost a year, Dr. Parker explained as they joined the table. What began as a scientific curiosity has become something much more significant. Chef Alex served a dish specifically designed for Vexillian taste receptors, a fusion of earth ingredients calibrated to their sensitive palates. As Zorlak tasted it, the other Vexillians watched with knowing smiles. The first time is always the most powerful, Nevrin said. Do you remember yours, Teslor? Strawberry ice cream, Tesla replied with uncharacteristic warmth for a Vexillian. I was studying earth plant propagation methods. My human colleague offered it during a break. I nearly fell over from the sensation. The others shared similar stories, accidental discoveries of flavor that led to profound personal changes. Each had struggled with the conflict between these new experiences and Vexillian cultural expectations. "But why keep this secret?" Zorlak asked. "If what you say is true, if these experiences are awakening dormant parts of our brains, shouldn't our society know?" Dr. Parker explained. "We've been gathering data before making any formal presentations. Vexillian society is resistant to change. We need irrefutable evidence that these sensory experiences enhance rather than detract from your species' capabilities. We believe our taste receptors remained intact for a reason," Belzik added. "Perhaps our ancestors knew future generations might need to rediscover these capacities." As the evening progressed, Zorlak felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. These Vexillians understood what he was going through because they had experienced it themselves. For the first time since his crisis began, he felt hope. "What about Peltok?" he finally asked. "By now he knows I've left the embassy. The recalibration order still stands." Dr. Parker nodded solemnly. "That's why we needed to meet tonight. Our research has reached a critical point. We've documented significant cognitive enhancements in our Vexillian participants, improved creative problem-solving, better intuitive decision-making, and stronger interpersonal communication skills. We believe it's time to present our findings to the Vexillian High Council," Kelmar said. "But we need a diplomatic voice, someone who can speak to the cultural implications as well as the scientific ones." "You want me to present your research?" Zorlak asked, surprised. "Not just present it, embody it," Dr. Parker said. "Your position gives you access the rest of us don't have. And your experiences as a diplomat give you insight into how these changes could benefit Vexillian society." Zorlak considered the enormous risk. If he failed, he would face not just recalibration, but likely permanent disgrace. Yet if these findings were valid, they could transform his entire species' understanding of themselves. "What exactly would I need to do?" he asked. Samantha, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "First, we need to keep you away from Peltok until we can arrange a meeting with someone higher up in your government. I have a friend who works at the Diplomatic Protection Service. He might be able to help." Chef Alex leaned forward. "And I'm going to teach you everything I know about the science of flavor. If you're going to convince your people, you need to understand exactly what's happening in your brain when you taste." Zorlak looked around at the faces of his new allies. Human and Vexillian together, working toward understanding. For the first time in his life, he felt part of something larger than duty or protocol. "I will do it," he said finally. "But we must move quickly. Peltok will not wait long before sending a retrieval team." Dr. Parker nodded. "Then let's begin tonight. We have much to prepare." As the group turned to planning, Zorlak caught Samantha's eye across the table. She smiled encouragingly. Whatever happened next would change his life forever, and possibly the future of his entire species. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Zorlak stayed hidden at Dr. Parker's research facility while the group worked on their presentation. Samantha's friend at the diplomatic service helped keep Peltok's retrieval team at bay with bureaucratic delays and paperwork issues. The breakthrough came when Dr. Parker secured a meeting with Vexillian High Minister Drenzor, who was arriving on Earth for a scheduled diplomatic conference. As the third highest official in the Vexillian government, Drenzor had the authority to overrule Peltok's recalibration order. High Minister Drenzor is known for his practical approach to problems, Kelmar explained as they finalized their presentation. "If we can demonstrate real benefits to Vexillian society, he may listen." On the morning of the meeting, Zorlak felt both nervous and determined. Chef Alex had prepared a special tasting menu designed to demonstrate the connection between flavor and brain function. Dr. Parker had organized their research into clear, logical arguments that even the most efficiency-minded Vexillian would understand. "Remember," Samantha said as she helped arrange the meeting room, "this isn't just about food. It's about rediscovering parts of yourselves that have been dormant for centuries." The moment arrived. High Minister Drenzor entered the conference room at the Interstellar Relations Center, accompanied by his aides and a very unhappy-looking Peltok. "Ambassador Zorlak," Drenzor said formally, "your behavior has caused considerable concern. Cultural Officer Peltok informs me you have been avoiding official recall." Zorlak bowed respectfully. "High Minister, I requested this meeting to present important research findings before submitting to recalibration. After reviewing our data, if you still believe recalibration is necessary, I will comply without further delay." Drenzor's expression remained neutral, but he nodded. "Proceed with your presentation." Dr. Parker stepped forward first, introducing herself and explaining the accidental discovery of how human food affected Vexillian brain patterns. She showed brain scans of Vexillians before and after experiencing flavor, highlighting the previously dormant neural regions that became active. "These areas," she explained, pointing to colorful sections on the screen, "are associated with creative thinking, emotional processing, and intuitive decision-making, capacities that complement Vexillian logical abilities rather than diminishing them." Kelmar presented next, showing data from experiments where Vexillians who had experienced food consistently outperformed control groups in problem-solving tasks requiring creative solutions. Throughout the presentation, Peltok looked increasingly uncomfortable. When Zorlak finally stood to speak, Peltok interrupted. "This is absurd. They are attempting to justify sensory indulgence by claiming it improves cognitive function. Our society has thrived for centuries without these primitive distractions." "Has it thrived?" Zorlak asked quietly. "Or has it merely functioned efficiently?" "High Minister, in my diplomatic work, I have observed that humans solve problems differently than we do. They use intuition, creativity, and emotional intelligence, alongside logic. These abilities our ancestors once had, give them flexibility we sometimes lack." Drenzor listened without comment, his expression unreadable. "I propose an experiment," Zorlak continued. "Chef Alex has prepared samples designed specifically for Vexillian physiology. I ask that you try just one, High Minister, and observe for yourself what happens." Peltok stepped forward in alarm. "This is highly irregular. I must protest this attempt to influence a governmental official through sensory manipulation. I am capable of maintaining objectivity, Cultural Officer," Drenzor said sharply. He turned to Zorlak. "I will try one sample, but I warn you. If this is merely an attempt to avoid recalibration, it will fail." Chef Alex brought forward a small plate containing what looked like a purple cube. "This is designed to activate Vexillian taste receptors, gradually, without overwhelming them. It contains elements familiar to your planet's original cuisine, before taste was engineered out." The room fell silent as Drenzor took the small cube and placed it in his mouth. For several seconds, his expression remained unchanged. Then, almost imperceptibly, his eyes widened. A subtle shift in his posture followed, and finally, most shocking to the Vexillians present, a slight change in his skin tone, the Vexillian equivalent of a blush. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "This is unexpected. What you're experiencing," Dr. Parker explained gently, "is the activation of neural pathways that have been dormant in your species for centuries. You're not just tasting flavor. You're reactivating parts of your brain that were designed to process complex sensory information." Drenzor turned to Zorlak. "You experience this regularly now?" "Yes, High Minister. And with each new experience, I find my diplomatic work improves. I understand humans better. I see connections I missed before. I believe these experiences have made me a more effective representative of Vexillia, not less." For several long moments, Drenzor was silent, seemingly engaged in internal reflection. Finally, he turned to Peltok. "Cancel the recalibration order." Peltok looked stunned. "But High Minister, the cultural contamination is not contamination at all," Drenzor interrupted. "It appears to be recovery of capabilities we ourselves suppressed." He turned back to the research team. "I wish to review all your findings in detail. This matter requires careful consideration at the highest levels of our government." The tension in the room dissolved into cautious relief. Samantha caught Zorlak's eye and smiled. Ambassador Zorlak will continue his diplomatic posting, Drenzor announced, and this research will continue under official sanction. We must understand the full implications before making any policy changes, but he paused, looking somewhat surprised at his own words. I believe there is significant potential benefit here for our society. After the meeting concluded and the Vexillian officials departed, the research team gathered to celebrate their success. I can't believe it worked, Samantha said, hugging Zorlak impulsively. He no longer found human physical contact strange but returned the gesture warmly. It is only a beginning, Dr. Parker cautioned. There will be resistance from traditionalists. Centuries of cultural programming won't change overnight, but it will change, Zorlak said with newfound confidence. Because the experience itself is irrefutable. Once you taste what life can be, you cannot go back to mere existence. 6 months later, Zorlak stood before a new group of Vexillian diplomats in the orientation room of the Interstellar Relations Center. Beside him, Samantha waited with a tray of carefully prepared food samples. You are about to begin a journey that will change you, he told the nervous Vexillians. For centuries, our society has valued efficiency above experience. We believed that by eliminating distractions like flavor, we were improving ourselves. He gestured to the small plates Samantha was now distributing. Today you will discover what our ancestors knew before we decided efficiency was everything. You will discover that taste isn't just about survival. It's about living fully. As the new arrivals cautiously tasted their first Earth foods, Zorlak watched their expressions change from confusion to wonder. He remembered his own first bite of garlic bread in Samantha's apartment, how it had started him on this unexpected path. Back on Vexilia, the debate about sensory experience continued, but more and more Vexillians were choosing to awaken their dormant senses. The strict efficiency-focused culture was slowly giving way to a more balanced approach, one that valued both logical thinking and creative intuition. For Zorlak, who had been promoted to senior cultural ambassador, the most satisfying change was personal. He no longer felt torn between duty and experience. Instead, he had discovered that the fullest expression of his potential included both his Vexillian logic and his newly awakened senses. As he watched the new diplomats experiencing their first tastes of Earth cuisine, he caught Samantha's eye across the room. They shared a smile, remembering how it all began with a simple dinner invitation and a bite of garlic bread that changed everything.